Hey guys, so today I'm going to do a little bit more in-depth tutorial style video for you. We have already started, as you can tell, ripping out the floor here. There had originally been a wall that came out here that we decided was not needed. So we took that out and then obviously had the two floors coming together but not meeting where the wall had been. So to help with the transition, so it doesn't just have a straight edge, which would look really awkward when you have a normal floor going on, we have already started to take out some of the planks to kind of give it a woven in look. So at this point, I'm going to remove these two pieces and show you how we've done some of the removal. Depending on where you are and what your situation is, there's quite a few ways you can remove the piece of wood, but I'm just gonna show you one on this piece. So to start, I find where the joint is, and then I keep the flat side of my chisel there. And for this one, I'll use a hammer and just kind of tap, see if it wants to separate. Some of them will kind of separate easily. Some of them are a little bit more finicky. Find it. This one's kind of covered from old flooring nastiness. So since we don't care about this piece of wood, I can be a little bit more aggressive on it. So once we have a little bit more space, I can use my pry bar and tuck that in there, and then I will go ahead and use the mallet to give a little bit more weight. And I'll start hitting it out. Once I'm there, I can go a little farther. This one's actually kind of already out, but we'll still show there. So now we'll go ahead and go on to this one. Ta-da! Alright, so we have all of our pieces of wood removed, but before we start laying our new flooring, we're going to clean up all the junk that's still kind of in here. So I pick up by hand the pieces that are larger just so our vacuum doesn't have as much work to do on the big pieces, and then I'll vacuum up all the rest of the stuff. Alright, so we got it first pass fairly clean up as far as little pieces of stuff. Now you'll notice that we still have this base like tar paper that's down between the flooring and the subfloor. Since we're going to be putting in new flooring, and some of it, as you'll notice, we don't have a tongue and groove on this side, so we're going to be gluing it in. To make sure that the glue sticks well and the floor holds up well after this, we're gonna actually have to remove this paper, which is kind of falling apart anyway. So I'll rip out as much as I can, and then I'll also take my X-Acto knife and cut out exactly where I need to on the floor. So now we need to measure our hole so that we can cut our new piece of wood to fit it. As you can see, we have a tongue on this side of our board. Seems very close. Which will fit into our groove over here. Similarly, we have groove on this side, tongue on this side, and it will sit nicely up against that. So, as we're starting to measure that, I will go from this side over to here, and it's just a little over 28 inches, a little over 28 and a half. So I will make sure that I am measuring from the top, because again the tongue will fit inside the groove. So from the top there, come across here and make my mark with my pencil at just a little over 28 inches. 28 and a half. I keep forgetting that part. 28 and a half inches, just a little bit over. Again, sometimes just to make sure, we'll check that measurement. Cool, I'm happy with it. So here too, we have a few things to make note of. Since we will be laying the piece of wood down in, or in some cases we will, and this one we're actually gonna be sliding it in a little bit more, but we wanna make sure that the top fits nice and snug against the next piece of wood. Sometimes if we just cut a flat face, it won't actually fit as close as we're wanting it to. So we will have our saw set at an angle to give us, we're using 5 degrees. So it's gonna cut into our wood by 5 degrees. So that's another thing, you wanna make sure you have your wood on the board so that the side you are wanting to keep has your angle cut into it. Otherwise, it will make your top even farther away. No good. So, put it up there, nice and snug. Find our mark. Get it lined up. Good, and then we'll go. No, we won't, because it's not on yet. All right. Line it up again. All right, and then we'll go. We will come back over here and see how we did. Do I think I can make it then? Probably. We might take just a little bit more off. So, after a few test fits, we have our board at the length that we need. So, it's gonna fit right in here, and with a little hammering, we will get that set. So, before we do that, since it is a little snug, we don't wanna have to put it in, take it out, and put it in again. Now, we're going to take our glue and run some beads all the way down. There we go. And I like to run a little bit along this tongue. Then here on our smooth face, we'll put a little bit there. Kind of. There we go. All right. Put my cap back on. And in my handy little glue holder. Then we will situate this guy. So here, kind of push it in as much as I can. Then I will take my scrap piece of wood. Well, that has glue on it. Scrap piece of wood. And we will hammer this in. And that looks pretty good. Okay, so now we have that piece obviously glued in, but just for good measure, we will also stick a few staples in the tongue. So I'll come here. Cool. All right, so our next piece. Now, since this one was open on both sides, we were able to just slide it in this way. This piece, obviously, we can't do that with. So, what will happen for this is we will, not with that piece, we will take a piece that has tongue and groove, and then we will hammer it in to the position. Before we do that though, since this was a harvested piece of wood, we'll have to remove this nail. So we'll kind of see how it's looking, where it will be. That seems so pretty. Yeah, and extras. Just for good measure, we might go ahead and vacuum that. So, since this one is going to fit in pretty snugly, we don't necessarily need to use glue, but we can still put a little bit down, again, just for extra safety. So we'll sit it in here. And then spare wood. All right. Now we have that one set. We come to our third piece, which is our most challenging piece of this set. As you can see, we also have a slide in here, so we would need to be able to push our board like we hammered that one in, but since this board is here, we can't do that. So instead, we will go ahead, we'll have this tongue fit into that groove, but then we will cut this off like we did this one so that it can lay down. But you notice, this will also need to get cut, so we will actually chip off our tongue so that it will fit down into the hole. Similarly, here in this area, we will cut off the lower piece so that it can lay down on top of the tongue and not get caught on the bottom. So we have lots of extra cutting going on for this piece of wood, and I'll do that now. All right, so to get this piece in, proved a little trickier than even I thought. We ended up needing to take off our tongue here so that we can slide it in and get this interlocking as much as possible. That said, still here on the end, we had to rabbit that a little bit so that it could sit down in there and not get caught on the bottom. Similarly, on this side, we had to take off the tongue so that it can sit down in here as well, since we're not able to just slide it in this way. So we will kind of shimmy it in like this, and then pound down and get it to sit flush. For that, we'll put a little bit of glue down. Pleased. So now we have laid 2 rows, and we'll just repeat that process, finishing out to the wall. I will circle back with you all when I get close to the end and show you how to put in those last few boards. So we are back with our final row to finish out this flooring. As you can see, it doesn't exactly, well, it doesn't take a full piece of wood, and it doesn't measure exactly straight side to side. So we get to use a little bit of all the techniques that we have been utilizing to lay the floor here on these last few pieces. So to start out, since I'm working with kind of scrap pieces now, I figured out how long I had, and then I measured my left side gap and my right side gap as closely as possible, because we want to try and wedge it in as much as we can. You could obviously just cut a small strip, because you will have your baseboard that will cover that, but if you want to try to get a little bit more pressure back across the whole floor, which is a great idea if you can, you're gonna have to be a little bit more specific with your fitting. So to do that, measured those gaps, took that over and cut our board down to size. Then, just like on our other boards where we're laying in, we're going to rabbet this one so that it can fit in and lay on top. So I started with my first rabbet, which is the normal one. So this one here, where you can kind of see from the side, this first little notch. But then, because of the intense angle, we ended up needing to do kind of a second little notch in so that it has a little bit more wiggle room to lay down into our hole. Then we put our glue down just like in the other instances, and now we're gonna work to wedge this guy in. So, as you could maybe see, maybe not since it was time lapse, as I was hammering, this little end kind of was jumping up. That's because it really doesn't have a whole lot holding it down, since it has the rabbets that are just letting it sit on top of the other pieces of wood, which means we need to finish nail the top of this one to keep it in place. So grab your handy nailer. You're gonna have to kind of finesse that next to the wall. Get that there on the top, and we'll do one on the other side as well, holding that down. And that should keep that there for us. Now we can do the same thing for these next few boards and finish out our floor here on this side.